And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Bubba and the BatFlip, episode 144. Continuing our positional previews of the 2023 fantasy baseball season with the outfield part due, going ADP 16 through 30 and some deeper options as usual to get you ready for the 2023 fantasy baseball season. You can find myself on Twitter at BDentric and my co-host is always on Twitter at BatFlipCrazy. Toby, how we doing, my friend?
Doing pretty well, Bubba. Yeah, I remember the part deux. Yeah, we don't talk about part twos around here.
No.
Just the part dues. But things are good. Things are good. We're getting closer to the season. Got 5 projection systems in my spreadsheet. Feeling great. They're updating on a regular basis. It's fantastic. So couldn't be happier. I've got like another week at the least before I start my drafts. I could start anytime in February and still align with my goals for the off season. So we'll see how I do once I get there.
So it's coming. It's about to start happening. We're going to get some Toby draft thoughts here pretty soon, which will be fun because right now it's spreadsheets, getting it all figured out. But when the rubber meets the road, it's about to get fun to see, when you get in the streets, as the kids say.
So, for sure. Yeah, I'm excited to test it all out.
How is it? Cause I don't know if it was, no, I don't think it was last week available yet. How are the projections looking now that you have all of your toys in play? And I'm referring to ATC now being involved with the Bad X and your steamer and all that stuff. How are you starting to feel about your projections?
I'm feeling all right. I think generally feeling good with the process. My process is a little bit different, and there's a question about this later on. I'm actually weighing kind of the bat and steamer a little bit more this year. And trying to get more. I think in the past I've really focused on the bat, steamer, and ATC, and I think I'm trying to integrate other ones. So right now I have Baseball HQ projections in there, and then I also have Rasball and steamer, but I'm essentially weighing the bat 40%, steamer and Rasball 20% each, because the Rasball is based on steamer.
That's what I was going to ask you. Okay, perfect.
with some playing time and other adjustments. So kind of trying to do that. I think that's nice because I think it's good to get wisdom of the crowd on the plate appearances for sure.
100%.
So I'm weighing those ones most heavily, and then I think like 10% Baseball HQ and 10% ATC at this point. I'm looking forward to having zips as well. I think there was a really interesting conversation, just about, and again, we have a question on it, so I won't get too much into it, just about aggregating projections and what makes for kind of effective or, maybe more helpful aggregations of different projection systems. So, and there's not one right answer, but it's
I'm looking forward to digging into that more with you later in the show because with the GTE guys I'm working with Curlin and Jorge and Simeone, this is the first year they're going hard into the SGP and the projections, and they're like doing their own models. It's pretty fun to watch them talk. And it's been a lot of that kind of like, how do they weigh which projections? And like I introduced them kind of to the Rasball steamer combination. They didn't really realize was a combination. They thought it was Rasball. Well, no, it's based on kind of a combination with steamer. Like, oh, so also you have to like weight things a little differently if you're using steamer already because you're already baking that in. So yeah, we'll get into that a little later. But it's a fun little puzzle, one of the mini puzzles to playing fantasy baseball. But like I think some people think you just put projections into a system and it's like blurts it out, but you do a lot more than just plugging them in. There's tinkering to kind of fit your desired results, but more like where you think it's going to work type thing. So that's where it's kind of a fun situation.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it'll probably change, there are interesting ways of thinking about how to do it, I think. And I honestly haven't thought as much as I need to, but I think that's one of the things is kind of, we get closer to the system is kind of honing in on them and seeing where maybe my own ideas about a player disagree with the projections and understanding a little bit why that might be happening. And, do you, even though the projection may not have a guy higher, do you still like him because of something that maybe you saw that the projection wasn't able to kind of attack? And then I think you also need to look at hitters and pitchers a little bit differently too. Because sometimes we can be better attuned to changes in pitchers than the projections can.
Totally agree, and we'll get to that later in the show. Looking forward to talking about that. But let's get to some outfield talk here. We'll do ADP 16 through 30. I have them based since January 1st is what I went off of when I made the list. There was like 14 drafts completed. I think there's like 16 now, like 24 hours later. So we're still in a spot where I could probably shrink it a little more, but we'll just go off of this. If for some reason guys changed and we missed them last week, sorry, but this is kind of what we got here. So the 16th outfielder, according to ADP at this point in time, and you look at overall ADP of 58.75 is the Schwarbombs, Kyle Schwarber, who last year 46 homers, 100 runs scored, 94 ribbies, 10 stolen bases, hit a whopping 218. But when you do all those other things with the OBP skills, you can kind of figure out batting average at another date and time. It's the highest I think I've ever seen him get drafted, though. So that's where it gets interesting, Toby. I'm really curious to hear what your system says because he's even projected to be a stud yet again. Like projection wise, he feels like he's pretty darn good again. And as long as he stays healthy, it's a big if. He's going to hit towards the top of the Phillies order. He's going to crush, and that's a beautiful thing. So, what do you think about Kyle Schwarber? Because I've been so torn on him in drafts right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think Schwarber is really interesting. He's the type of guy who, was going a ways back last year and fell a little bit last year because of, batting average and steals is what you were looking for, and he doesn't necessarily contribute as much in those. Well, lo and behold, with the 10 steals and the batting average still tanked, but home runs have become so much more important and so much more valuable. And so I think that's something that you just have to kind of work with in this landscape. The projections actually like Schwarber, about where he's going right now. I have him ranked as the 57th best player, ADP of 62nd. So a little bit of a value, like nothing overwhelming, but I think the projections like a little bit of a boost in batting average, closer to where his career average is, which makes sense. He had not a career low, but for a full season, a career low in BABIP. The ground ball rate was way down, which resulted in a lot more power. The line drive rate was also pretty low, though, too. So that may be the reason why that BABIP is different than it will probably be this year. A lot of the projection systems are looking at like anywhere from a 271 to a 257 BABIP. So the fly ball ways probably won't impact that, but great plate discipline, really good team that he's on, obviously. So you can see some of the reasons why, why he's moved up so much from last year. I think you still have to, navigate a little bit these waters of the batting average and steals. He could benefit a lot from the shift potentially, but and I think people are probably factoring that into the equation too. Just given like that profile where he's going and how I attacked drafts earlier, he's probably not going to show up on a ton of my teams, but there's no problem with it as long as you kind of account for it later on in the drafts and you're okay with a little bit of the lack of balance in one of your first 5 picks.
Yeah, that's why it's an interesting team build because he's not going to, I don't think he'll have as bad a batting average as he had this past year, but it's not going to be elite by any means. So you got that into play, 10 stolen bases. I don't foresee him stealing a ton of bases. That was just kind of a cool thing. You never know. But like you said, the shift, he might benefit a bit, but he's such a high fly ball guy. Like those doesn't matter when he's shifting. But what's fun with him is like usually I think he might be getting pushed up a little bit also because everyone's concerned about power so much last year. And I get it because I've been trying to attack power early in drafts. And I'm curious, like I usually pass on him because around that point I'm taking starting pitchers. Now I wonder if I started my draft differently, if I'd be good going there because I've been trying to get like a Yordan or a Pete Alonso or an Austin Riley or one of those big power bats early that brings a better batting average, of course. But the main reason I'm going there is for power. So I'm wondering on team build wise, if I kind of shifted things around, went a little more starting pitcher earlier or something, if Schwarber would kind of fit the team build idea. So I'll have to keep toying with that. It's kind of an interesting thing because I've never really looked at him because where he's going, it's totally like an SP2 spot for me. And that's just how my builds have been going. But if I change it up, he might actually fit what I'm looking at because, there's always power as you go through the draft, but I don't think there's a guy that you're confident if he plays 150 plus games, he's getting you 40 plus home runs. That's like a pretty nice thing to be able to lock into your draft. So be interesting to see how that one keeps unfolding. The 17th outfielder off the board, and this is a fun one because you're either all in or all out, it feels like, on Corbin Carroll. Right now, the Arizona Diamondbacks ADP of like 75. So you have between Schwarber and Carroll, it drops off like 18 picks or so, 15, 16 picks. So you get about a round or so between outfielders. And again, that could be the starting pitching situation. But Carroll made his debut last year, 4 homers, 2 steals in 32 games. Spent time throughout the minors. We've seen power and speed from him. Projected to be the everyday outfielder in Arizona. Projections only have him playing like 128 games, though. So if he's the everyday guy, this is one of those guys you kind of might change projections on, which could change your overall outlook on a guy, or you follow the projection. So this is kind of a fun one to toy with a little bit. But what's your thoughts on Corbin Carroll? Because I haven't been able to go all in on him, but I've talked to a few guys that are D-back that follow the D-backs, and they're like, he's as legit as they come, they say.
Yeah. I think one thing that hates Corbin is the projections.
Yep.
He's a negative 72 on my spreadsheet. So his ADP is 73 and he's ranked 145. I have a little equation that I do where I just divide ADP by their rank to determine value, so just like, if a guy's ranked 2 and his ADP is 4, then he'll have a value of 2. Anything above 1 is essentially a guy that's positive in terms of, a comparison between ADP, and the higher the number, the better. He's at a 0.5, which essentially means that like he's worth, I don't know, half of what he's going at right now, according to the projection systems. Now, Steamer is normally the highest on rookies, and Steamer has him at 20 homers, 19 steals. Now, if that's what he ends up being, then I think he's much closer to where he's going in picks. It still has the batting average pretty low at 242, even at Steamer. BatX is a little bit higher on the batting averages, as is ATC, but they're a little softer on the power and the steals. So, what are the positives is he's a top prospect. He's elite, speed. He's got some pop. He's hit every single place that he's been. That is worth a lot. Some of the negatives I think you can see in just how he performed. Like he hit 260 with 4 homers and 2 steals in 115 plate appearances, which isn't, a terrible, right? But he struck out 27% of the time. The contact rate was around league average, though, so maybe a little bit of luck there. The O swing was fine. He did not hit the ball hard. He did not hit the ball well. He had a 333 BABIP, but I'm not sure that's gonna keep up with the batted ball quality that he had, just in terms of like 20% infield fly ball rate, pretty high ground ball rate. He did have a 20% home run per fly ball, but that seems high given, that's like an elite number. That's like a Schwarbaum's type of number. The max EV was just mediocre, 107.5 in 73 batted ball events, only a 5.5% barrel rate. So he had as many barrels as home runs. The D-backs Chase Field is not a good hitting environment anymore.
Not at all.
So I think it's just one of those questions where it's like, do you trust kind of the numbers and the projections, or do you trust the scouting and the, player development stuff? And it's a little hard for me, but I tend to think that you don't need to make this draft pick here. I think there are other players that provide a pretty similar profile.
Yeah, I have not drafted Corbin Carroll, but it's like the people that love him, they obviously point to the projections being completely wrong. They fight the projections, and like I could see it if like you projected him for 145 games, like another 15 to 20 games, maybe you get closer to 23, 24 homers and 18, 19 steals or something. Who knows? And then it gets a little more interesting. But like some people think the ceiling's higher than that. I just don't see it yet, but could be wrong. And we talk about where we take our risks. This is kind of early for risks still to me. We're talking top 100 pick, still trying to get the base of my team put together. And Corbin Carroll probably won't be on the base of my team's right now. That's kind of the way the cookie crumbles, as they say. 17th outfielder, 17th, 18th outfielder off the board, sorry, is one Eloy Jimenez, ADP 77. Very popular name all over fantasy baseball Twitter these days. If he's healthy, we know he's great. Doesn't steal, but the power is pretty legit. Decent batting average. Like we've seen it throughout his career. It's just a matter of staying healthy. We just hope he would DH because when he came back from the IL last year as a DH was amazing. But now the reports are already coming out that he's working on playing in the outfield again. So who knows what's going to happen? He's healthy right now. I know that much. So I love Eloy Jimenez. If you don't need steals, you just got to wonder. There's always that injury concern with that guy. What about you, Toby?
Yeah, I'm not really into Eloy this year. I know there's a lot of people who are, and I'm not quite sure I fully understand it. The projection of my projection, which is my own unique blend of everything, doesn't really love Eloy. 81st in ADP and 100 in terms of his ranking. And that's assuming that he hits like most of the projection systems do, assuming that he gets to about 600 plate appearances, which it's been a while since he did that. He's actually never done that in his career. Obviously, like you're injury prone until you aren't, but he's not necessarily the most athletic guy. 276 career batting average. Obviously, some of that is with injuries happening there, but the power plays for sure in the middle of that lineup. I'm just not sure how much we can count on that. I'm not totally sure how much we can count on both the health aspect of it and I don't know. It's just been so long since we saw it on a consistent basis from him. So
it's a White Sox thing. It's just a White Sox thing. Tim Anderson, Lou Bob, Eloy runs into the walls. Like that's why I just don't play the outfield. Just DH. When he came back from his wall injury, he was healthy at DH the entire time. It was great, but we had not seen it yet. I'm willing to take a chance on him, but I have not been like running to get him because a lot of people are very high on Eloy right now. So he has not gotten on too many of my rosters. And that was when I thought he'd be the full-time DH because that was the original plan. And now that plan is already changing as the more you listen to things through White Sox blurbs as people are starting to show up to camp early. And it's not what I wanted to hear. I know that much. So we'll see how that keeps playing out throughout spring training. The 19th outfielder off the board, going just like a half a pick behind Eloy Jimenez, is Teoscar Hernandez, and this is a guy I usually take instead of Eloy Jimenez if I'm going in this range. The power's there. There is a little bit of speed as well, which Eloy will not give you. Okay batting average. He actually came through pretty nicely last year after a horrific start to the season. Really got it going like in the second half if you kind of break things down. Going to Seattle, which we know is not the most ideal ballpark to hit in, especially leaving Toronto for Seattle. But it's a heck of a lineup still. That Seattle lineup is very, very good. So I still am a big fan of Teoscar Hernandez, and I think at this pick, I think it's a nice little discount from last year for sure. What about you?
Yeah, I don't mind it. Like if I think about, Eloy or Teoscar, I would probably lean Teoscar in this situation. The projections agree a little bit. I mean, it's 91 versus 100, but there's less than $1 difference between the two of them. Teoscar struggled a little bit with injury last year, but he has been more consistent, in terms of playing recently, although he too hasn't hit that 600 plate appearance mark. But, the skills have been pretty consistent, across the board. Like the one thing that kind of sticks up as an outlier is he's always been pretty good at getting the ball in the air. And last year, I think probably due to those injuries, he had a high ground ball rate, 44%. His career is 39. So I think you see some regression there, which will help the power numbers, and the projections say that as well. He ranges from 28 to 30 home runs. When it comes to that, the plate discipline has been very consistent as well. Last year, 33% O swing, 32.4% for his career. Contact rate 68%, 67.7 for his career. So he's still got similar skills. It's not as good of a hitting environment, but Safeco isn't terrible or T-Mobile isn't terrible
For guys
for,
like Teoscar.
yeah, for homers. It's
Yeah.
not terrible for homers. I think he's not in as good of a lineup, but the lineup is okay. So I could see being interested in him because I don't necessarily think the skills have changed that significantly from his breakout year. And so it's just a matter of him staying healthy again. So I would probably lean him over Eloy. I can see people leaning Eloy because of the batting average, but I think I'll take probably takes Teoscar.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. It's close. It's close, but I think the overall profile of Teoscar, in health wise, like last year was hurt, yes, but long term health wise has been a lot better for Teoscar. So we'll play that angle for sure. 20th outfielder off the board. It's a fall from grace when it comes to drafting Starling Marte, pick 82. 16 home runs last year, 18 stolen bases, hit 292. So the average is still great, which is what you expect. Power was kind of what we get. He's had a couple 20 home run seasons, but for the most part, he's a mid-teens guy. Stolen bases were down a bit. It was still a good season. Only played in 118 games though, because he did battle injuries. Bright side is he's now a real big discount. This was a guy that like 2 years ago was almost making it in the first rounds in some drafts. That was like a headway, and then last year's probably second and third round in drafts. Now you're getting around pick 80, 85, somewhere in that range. Much more appealing to me, especially for if you like kind of took pitching early, or if you're looking for later steals or a five category contributor, not an elite five category, but five category contributor. I don't think we're like done seeing this on Starling Marte. He's going to be 34, which is never, eventually things start slowing down, but it hasn't for him yet. So I still like Starling Marte, especially at this price. I don't know about you, Toby.
Yeah, I agree. I think the projections like him too. They like him the most out of the three that we just discussed. They actually like him pretty close to Kyle Schwarber. Schwarber is like $19 and Marte is like 18. But I think for Marte too, I think the one thing about that projection where you can see some upside is, so that's with a projection of between 13 and 17 home runs and then 23 to 29 steals. And then with a batting average range of 267 to 274. Well, it's been a while since he hit that low. So if you believe the batting average should or could be higher, then that is going to significantly increase that value too. So I think it's one of those scenarios where you ask yourself, well, if he were to do exactly what he's done in the last 3 full seasons, right, where he had 505 plate appearances, 526, 586, you'd take any of those 3 seasons and just say, hey, I'll plug in a replacement value guy for the other 100 to 150 plate appearances. And I think you're feeling pretty good. And so I think that's what's kind of unique about his profile is you don't really need him to play a full season. You need him to get 500, maybe even 450 plate appearances to kind of reach where his ADP is going right now. I also think he's the type of guy that's going to shoot up a little bit as we get closer. He's further away from core surgery. We know he's going to play. People become desperate for steals and batting average, and he's kind of a guy who provides both of those. So I do like Marte. I know what I should start saying. I should say I haven't drafted him yet. I'm 0 for 0. I've drafted him in 0% of my drafts, but he could be one of those interesting guys, especially if you start off kind of hitting.
The way you draft, it fits right into your mold.
Yeah, like if you're starting off with pitchers, and some catchers and some closers thrown in there too, then you could start yourself off with Mr. I was going in the second or third round last year. With Marte. So, and I just point out, like, I think last year is a really good example of regression for steals guys, where he had 47, which was like out of the blue, right? 2 years ago. And everybody's like, well, even if you regress, even if you take away some, he's in the 30s. Well, it's like, well, instead he's at 18. And so I think it's something where even if a guy shows that he has a skill and he does it, you still got to regress that. And I think it goes to a point that I've heard Jeff Zimmerman make a couple times, which is, with the new steals environment out there, it's like, don't forget to still bake in regression. Like regression is still a more powerful force than probably the rule changes will be. And I think that's important to note, not for Marte specifically, but just in general for guys who maybe had career highs last year in steals.
No, this is kind of an off the outfield topic, but you talk about baking in regression. I just want to ask it in general because I have an idea, but for someone like yourself that uses projections so much, and most projections are pretty cautious when they put out their numbers. They're not like aggressive most of the time. So are they baking in the regression for you, or should you bake in more regression?
Well, I mean, I think I would trust the projections, what they're spitting out, so a range between 22 steals and 29. So let's just call it, 25, 26 steals. Again, these are assuming around 600 plate appearances. Like the lowest plate appearance total is 563. The next highest is, or the highest is 601. So they're all kind of within that range. And I think if you look at that, I think expecting 25 or so seems like a very reasonable expectation for him. Whereas truly last year, you should have been expecting a pretty similar return for like a guy who's just 1 year older and had never really stolen at that rate before. I mean, I guess in 2016 he did have 47 as well, but that's a long time ago.
Yeah, it's a little different. But yeah, no, that's it. Marte is a very intriguing option where he's going. I agree. He should get pushed up. Like he should be in the Corbin Carroll range at least. Come like the peak of draft season. So it'll be fun to see how that pans out. An outfielder going at ADP outfield 21, right behind Marte with an ADP of 84.1 compared to Marte's 82.1 is George Springer, who again injury riddled guy, played 133 games, most he's played since 2018. 25 homers, 14 steals, which is the most he's had since 2015. Hit 267, which is kind of in line with the norm for him. He's around 260, 270 without like a random odd year. And the projections have him on a very similar path this year, similar amount of games, power, speed, nothing crazy. And it's kind of who George Springer is now, which is a very quality guy at this ADP. Because again, he's another guy who used to go way sooner. So he's another intriguing one for me in this range. What do you think about Springer, who I could see an argument for Springer versus Teoscar and Eloy at the same time?
Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, I think it's a lot of these guys are so similar. You could see just waiting to see who is kind of the last one standing there. Yeah, for Springer, I don't know if I've ever drafted George Springer, honestly.
He's usually going so much higher.
He is usually going a lot higher. I mean, I can totally see it. Hitting leadoff, the batting average has been solid, throughout the career, 269 career, 267, 264, 265. You feel like you can kind of bake that in. The home run total has been really nice as well, like pretty much every season. So he's been very consistent, gotten the strikeout rate down, although, last year was a little bit of an anomaly. His contact rate was the lowest it's been in his career, and his strikeout rate was also, one of the second lowest that it's been. So that's a little bit of a mirage there, I think. But as they usually do, the projections are pretty smart in kind of baking that in, and they have him higher at about a 19% strikeout rate. The one thing that I was seeing that's a little bit of a concern, 35 barrels last year for an 8.3% barrel rate. That's his lowest since 2018. Dip in max exit velo as well. So maybe that has to do with the injury, but he is a little bit older. And yeah, so that's all to say. I think he's probably pretty fine. And I'm sure the projections think he's pretty fine as well. What do they have him as? Yeah, they have him.
10,
yeah. 84th, 84 ADP 70th rank.
So where he's going.
Yeah. I mean, him. So like just kind of looking, one of the reasons why I have it is, that value number that I mentioned, Teoscar and Eloy are both under. So they're 0.86, 0.81, meaning they're not currently quote unquote values based on projection versus ADP. Whereas Marte is a 1.27, and George Springer is a 1.2. So they're pretty similar, in terms of value. And that's nice. There's a nice little pocket at this point in the draft, I think, where you're getting some undervalued outfielders.
Yep, most definitely, especially because pretty soon we're gonna get to a point where outfielder starts to dry up a bit or it gets a little dicier. So it's a nice little pocket for sure to maybe double tap them real quick and get a couple pretty solid options to go with your roster. The 22nd outfielder off the board with an ADP of 92 and a half is Brian Reynolds. This is an interesting one. 27 homers, 7 steals last year, hit 262. So the average was down, power was up a bit, counting stats were down, Pirates weren't great. But there's rumbles of a potential trade, which you never know could help the value. Obviously, with the Brian Reynolds, there's a lot to be determined in that regards. But again, if you just look at projections, this is a similar profile to the guys we've been talking about, but he's going even later than these guys. So Reynolds is a guy I don't have any shares of anywhere so far. I don't know why. I just don't. What are your thoughts on Brian Reynolds, who I just can't get a good pulse on, I guess?
Yeah, I like Reynolds a lot. I think the batting average, like you mentioned before, he's kind of a stud there. 281 career batting average, a little bit lower last year at the 262. He did have an increase in strikeout rate, which also aligned with a drop in contact rate. So just something to consider. His plate discipline was also the worst that it's been. So that's something, but and his home run per fly ball was the highest that it's been as well. 27 home runs on 32 barrels. So, there's like a little skepticism there, but I just think the profile is so solid. Like the batting average, is there. It's going to be good. It's got a chance to be elite if everything kind of clicks for him. The counting stats a little bit of a question mark just because of the context that he's playing in. But like you mentioned, there is the possibility he gets traded. But I think he provides that home runs. He provides a little bit of that speed, and I think that's really nice coupled with that batting average there. And like I mentioned, he's in a little pocket of some nice values here for outfielders, where he's 74 and ADP, or he's ranked 74th in my sheet, and he's 90. He's going 93rd right now with ADP. So, again, 3 outfielders going all together: Marte, Springer, Reynolds, all with one of that value rating I mentioned of 1.2 or higher. Reynolds is second at 1.25. So nice little area here, I think, where you can target an outfielder and pick up some a guy who may be a little bit undervalued.
Very nice. The next one, the 23rd outfielder is MJ Melendez. We talked about him at catcher. You're not really drafting him to play the outfield.
Absolutely draft him to play outfield, please.
Yeah, we're gonna pass on MJ. We talked about him like a month and a half ago at the catcher's position. Well, we'll recap him again here pretty soon. But we'll go to the 24th outfielder off the board. This is a fun one, digging in throughout the offseason here. It's Tyler O'Neill, ADP of 107. And now 2 years ago, 34 homers, 15 ribbies, 286. We all knew, or we all suspected, it's going to be tough to redo that. It's also tough to redo that when you only play in 96 games. But 14 homers, 14 steals in those 96 games. The average dropped to 228. He's better than that, though. So it's like an in-between thing. And that's what makes this fun. Because we've talked about a lot of guys here lately, 20 to 25 homers, 8 to 14 steals range. Tyler O'Neill could do that and some potentially. Just doesn't have the average those guys bring to the table that you talked about earlier. So this is a fun kind of floor ceiling play compared to the guys you talked about. So the more I've looked into Tyler O'Neill, the more I'm interested in him and his ADP of 107. How are you looking into Tyler O'Neill?
Yeah, he's really interesting. I mean, he had a god awful season. It couldn't have gone worse last year, and he still was 14-14, for home runs and steals. And it's not like you were just drawing blanks on that, additional 200 plus plate appearances that you missed on. So, while he was certainly disappointing, I think you still see the signs there of a guy who can contribute significantly. And the projections are in pretty consistent alignment, in terms of where they feel like he should be, somewhere in the 240s batting average wise, 25 home runs and 15 steals, essentially, is what it all kind of boils down to. And so he comes in at another guy who's providing some value, 103 ADP, and then at 94 rank. So, not as good as some of those guys going before him. I think there's obviously the consistency issues with him, but he's really good defensively, which I think keeps him in the lineup, even when he does struggle a little bit. If there's one guy who really needs the yoga narrative,
Yes,
who really needs to start
100%.
doing yoga, with Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton, it is definitely Tyler O'Neill. And I was reading an article recently where they were saying like he's going in like a new direction for his workout routine.
Yep.
But it was like talking about plyometrics. And I was like, I don't want to hear about things I don't even know what they mean. I want to hear about yoga.
Yeah.
All
Four-letter word. We want a four-letter word that starts with Y.
Yeah. I mean, this might contribute to the yoga narrative, but I have never really done yoga before in my life. Like I've done stretching, I've done things like that. And I did yoga for the first time in December. And it really changed my life. I haven't done it since.
Changed it that much.
But I mean, well, actually, I don't know. I do some yoga related stretching, but you know, it's so rare that we concentrate our minds and our breathing and our bodies in alignment. And so, as a result of that, I've started cooking more.
Get you.
Yeah. So, anyways, that's my yoga narrative. You
it's-
should all go out there and get a yoga narrative too.
It's good. It's good. Stretching, yoga stretching, whatever you prefer. It's very good. Trust me. Especially the older you get, very important. So go ahead, go ahead and do that. The 25th outfielder off the board, another guy that had a weird season. Started out really, really good and disappeared for a bit. Got it going a little late, but overall, Seiya Suzuki, who has an ADP of 109. 14 homers, 9 steals at 262. Not bad for his first run. He's better than that, though. He showed signs where he's a much better player than that. So he's another guy where it's like, and even the projections agree he's better than that. When you look at it, he feels like another, like this is a range from like 75 to we're still going of outfielders that you could see bringing you a nice floor with tons of upside if things start to click for these guys. And Seiya is definitely one of those guys for me. So I like him a lot at this ADP. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I like Suzuki a lot too. Excuse me.
Bless you.
The sneezing narrative. I like Suzuki a lot too. He's a guy where kind of my own assessment differs a little bit with where the projections feel like he should be, because his projection is at 121st ranked, and he's 111th right now in ADP. So he's a negative 11. 0.91 value. So not a value or you know, whatever perceived value player, but I really like him a lot. And the reasons I like him, he's got a great plate discipline, 25.6. So he's going to get on base. He's going to be able to score some runs. The contact rate is really good. It's much higher than league average overall at 79.5% and higher than league average in the zone at 88.9%. As well. He's got speed, you know, the 9 steals and 446 plate appearances. He's got a little pop. You know, he had 32 barrels last year and only 14 homers. So, you know, was that a little bit of bad luck? Was it a little bit of him going to center and oppo a little bit too much? Is it a little bit of Wrigley Field, which actually isn't a great home run park? Is it just, you know, him being unlucky? I think the projection systems see him being a little bit unlucky, but I think the question is he the 25-9 guy that Steamer sees him at, or is he more of the kind of 20 homer, 9 steal guy that most of the other projection systems see him as? And I think I want to dive in a little bit more because I know he finished on a high streak. You know, he's barreling the ball at a really nice rate, 11%. He does have that great plate discipline, those great contact skills. He puts the ball in the air higher than league average amount as well. You know, the K rate seems a little high for the contact rate. Maybe it's the CSW, you know, maybe that's, it was 31.3%. So he's taking a lot of pitches. And so I just wonder if maybe he's the type of player that's worth a little bit of a risk. So yeah, he needs to be a little bit more aggressive. So his in zone swing percentage last year was 57.4%. And league average is 69.1%. So his problem, why the strikeout rate was higher, was he was not being nearly as aggressive. And so there's potential for a little bit of growth there, maybe if he is So do you side with kind of the projections and where they have him going, or do you just isolate Steamer and say, oh, he's going to hit 25 home runs and steal 9 bases? I don't know, but
Yeah, it's tricky
worth
because
discussing.
it's definitely worth discussing. I guess you said and I said is I think there's so much more to what we saw last year, and the projections, like we said, give them more. But I think there's might be more than that, and that's why it's really interesting with Seiya Suzuki. And trying to imagine what a guy will do is probably not the best way to draft an entire team. But every once in a while, when you get a pick after post 100, you can start doing things like that, and makes it fun. The 26th outfielder off the board at a wonderful, wonderful ADP of 112 is the 29-year-old. Yes, just turned 29. Crazy to think about to me. Byron Buxton. Man, oh man, what could be if he ever stayed healthy. And projections have him playing like 130 games, which would be the second most of his career, and only the second time he's been over 100 games in his career, which would be crazy to think about. And if he did that, he'd be worth every penny of this draft pick. But Toby, I don't know about you. I can't trust that at all, which is terrifying because it's true. If he played that many games, the dude is a second round pick, maybe first round even. Like if he got to 140 plus games, he's done it one time. And that's the struggle. So I'm out on Buxton. It sucks to say. Um, they say everyone has a price. I just don't know what his price is for me. So what about you?
Yeah, I think it's hard. I think it's hard to go back to that well. I picked him up. I picked him up last year, and it got burned a little bit. I mean, he did hit the 28 bombs, which was huge, but and it's not like that's that out of the ordinary for him. But I think with that increased power is also coming a very low BABIPs. Like, or I mean, just a lot of variance in his BABIP, honestly. But 244, 344, 241, 314, 226. Some small samples in there, but it's just hard without being able to bank on something other than the power. He seems pretty one-dimensional now. I don't think he's going to really help you in batting average. All of the projections are in agreement with that. The steals, God knows what they're going to do with him, on that front. And so I'm just not sure he contributes enough in enough categories with the health to be able to do that, to go there. So I'll stay away, even though he's a great value according to the projections. But as you mentioned, there may be a little bit of a flaw in that.
130 game projected. It's like we haven't. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, if he played 130, yes, we all agree he'd be of value at that point. So it's a little tricky to say the least.
Yeah.
27th outfielder off the board. One Jake McCarthy of the D-backs, ADP of 116.5, came off the waiver wires last year and helped people dominate their leagues with 23 stolen bases in 99 games, even hit 8 home runs, hit 283. Saw throughout the minors, he showcased a little power with some speed. So it wasn't completely out of the ordinary for him. It was kind of a surprise to many of us that it happened. And, he should play every day for the D-backs this year. And projections have him for, 10 to 12 homers and 25 to 30 stolen bases. So are you, I guess what I'm saying is this could be one of those guys, if you're kind of lacking steals without waiting too long in the draft, this could be a nice guy to target. But what do you think about Jake McCarthy?
Yeah. The projections certainly think so. They have McCarthy as the 79th best player. He's going 122 right now. So that's a 43 pick difference between his, projection right now and and where he's going in drafts. So, but I think people are nervous about the playing time, a little bit of a crowded outfield in Arizona. I don't think McCarthy is, kind of young enough to constitute a like superstar prospect. So a little bit of surprise, I think, in terms of how successful he was. The batting average is a little bit elevated. I think the projections account for that. The power, he had 8 home runs, he had 12 barrels. So not anything extreme, but I think good enough. Makes a decent amount of contact, right around league average. So I think there's a little bit of give from what he did, last year. A lot of the projection systems bake that in. I think the speed is going to be the carrying trait, and I think we'll determine whether it's a successful pick or not. But I do like him going right here, we talked about kind of that group of undervalued outfielders. And he is in a little group of them, another group of them right here as well. So I do like McCarthy, a decent amount. And I think he's well-rounded. He's balanced, which I think is nice.
Yeah, he's definitely growing on me throughout this draft season as I dig on him more and more and realize he is going to play every single day and potentially hit towards the top of that order in Arizona, which not the greatest team, but definitely serviceable for fantasy purposes. The 28th outfielder off the board at ADP 121 is Stephen Kwan. This is a guy that's really started to grow on me this offseason. 6 homers, 19 steals, 298 last year. I think the projections are low on him, to be honest. A few games too low and just overall numbers too low. Just because if you look at his second half numbers, he really started to improve quite a bit, which was great to see. I think that's something that can translate into this season. And Ryan Roof was on my Cleveland Guardians preview show, and he mentioned some very intriguing things about Stephen Kwan that without the shift last year, he hit like 360. With the shift on, he hit like 270. So that's a gigantic difference because now if you got a guy that can hit closer to 300, we're talking 100 runs scored potentially. There's a lot of things that factor. Obviously, chances for more steals. I don't think the power is going to be anything crazy, but I think there's a lot more to like than the projections say. And I'm very interested in Stephen Kwan. I don't know if you're going to agree with that, but what are your thoughts on Stephen Kwan?
Yeah, I'm just kind of taking a look a little bit here. Sorry, I went down a rolling graph rabbit hole there.
Just another evening for Toby.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean, he's such an interesting profile. He's so different than most other players. I think it's challenging to grab him here. I mean, the batting average, I think the projections are a little low on him from a batting perspective, just because he makes such elite contact.
Yes.
The power really is non-existent, though.
No,
I mean,
the power sucks.
Yeah, the power sucks. I don't think Steamer's on it with 11 home runs. I mean, he had 6 home runs, but 7 barrels. So really relying on pulling the ball in Cleveland, where it's a left-handed hitter's dream. But he does play excellent defense, so I don't think he's going to lose playing time or anything like that. But, we also said the same thing about Miles Straw, who had not the same profile by any stretch of the imagination, but something similar. So I don't think I could go there. I just don't know if there's enough other things that he provides. But I could certainly see where a team that's lacking in batting average and a little bit of speed could turn his direction.
Yeah.
The projections hate him.
Yeah, the projections don't
but
like him
as
at
you
all.
mentioned, he's going ADP at 116 on my sheet, and he's at 157 in terms of ranking. But again, I think this is a question of whether you agree with the projections or not on him.
Yeah, and that's why it's fun because there's always a handful of projections where it's like that doesn't make any sense, and that's one of them for me. I remember last year one that sticks out. We talked about it a ton, like Dalton Varsho. It's like he's going to play more than 90 games. Like let's fix this. There's always a few that just kind of it is what it is, and then it's up to you to decide what you want to do with it. That's the process. If you read The Process by Jeff Zimmerman, they talk about that, so you can kind of tweak it if you feel free, but just make sure you know what you're tweaking for and why. The 29th outfielder off the board at ADP 127 is Taylor Ward, Los Angeles Angels. 23 homers, 5 steals, 281 average. Phenomenal start to the season, and then it's kind of limped to the finish line. It felt like literally was almost not even worth starting on fantasy weeks to weeks towards the end of the season. What's your thoughts on Taylor? I can't go full Jared Walsh, don't get me wrong. But what are your thoughts on Taylor Ward, who the end stat line is still very, very good, but there were definitely letdowns at times towards the end.
Yeah. I want to say I like Taylor Ward.
Then say it.
I think I like Taylor Ward. He is a value on the spreadsheet, not that much, but 129 is his ADP, 113 is the rank, 1.14. I think he's a unique combination of plate discipline, very low O swing, 23.6%, which again, isn't always a good thing. but the contact rate is elite at 80%. And then he was also able to barrel the ball up 46 barrels last year at 12.1%. And he's going to be in a really good lineup. I think they like him a lot. So I think he's a guy that can provide that batting average and that power. And I think that's pretty consistent. And I think, didn't he crush it at the end of the last season? Like, I think it was.
I know he started out on fire. I felt like he disappeared, but maybe I'm wrong.
He disappeared for a while, but I think he had a 174 WRC plus in September.
There you go.
He was really bad. So he went 257, 194 for his WRC plus. And then 77, 71, 86.
Yeah, now I'm looking at September numbers. He did have a big September. Yes, I stand corrected. Very big September.
The power really dried up. But, I mean, I don't know why that is. Maybe there was an injury in there middle of the season. I don't know. But he was really crushing it towards the end. So I think he's a really intriguing pick. I like Taylor Ward here. I can get behind Taylor Ward.
Yeah, no, that's understandable, especially a little bit of power, or a lot of power, a little bit of speed. So definitely, like, he's almost like a mini Eloy, if that's what you want. So it's an interesting.
Ooh, I like that. That.
A big ADP difference. There's a lot of similarities in that stat line. So you can get them a lot later. That's the fun part about looking at ADP and trying to figure things out. The 30th outfielder off the board at ADP 128 is Christian Yelich. And I think everyone's finally gotten past the MVP years of Yelich and has realized, at least I have, and I know we talked about it on Bubba and the Bloom a few times. He's shown up on a few different Bloom boards already. This is who Yelich is. He's like a 13 to 16, 17 home run guy. Might get you 15 to 20 steals, great OBP, hit for a decent average, nothing crazy, and score a ton of runs at the top of the Brewers lineup. That's who he is. Like, if you look at the best way I kind of came to that conclusion is you look at his quality of contact last year, 8.2% barrel, 48% hard hit. If you look at his year before that, 7.6, 48.4. If you go before the MVP years, set in 2017, 6.145, 9.249. Similar stat lines. That's who he is now. He's this like good guy, not this MVP guy. And I have no problem with that at this ADP. We're not, paying these premiums. We're not paying top 100 picks. You're getting like a 15-15 with a little bit of upside and legit could score 100 runs in Milwaukee. So I think this is to me, a really nice floor profile with a little bit of a ceiling. So I like Christian Yelich in this spot. I'm starting to like buy into him more because it's not as risky. The back's still a concern. Not going to deny that. But we've seen it for a couple years now. So I like Yelich. What do you got on him?
Yeah, I mean, he's pretty much like identical to Ward in terms of like, a little slight value. He's interesting. I mean, Yelich is very interesting. I think what you said captures it perfectly just in terms of like the player he is now. And I think we need to kind of embrace that, extreme ground ball guy again,
maybe the shift helps him.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things that I was actually thinking about is that could be something where, like with the shift, there could definitely be maybe some benefit here just because he's so extreme, and if you can get that batting average up, not to, the 329, 326 of his MVP years, but like to that 298, that 282, that 284 where he was before, while contributing, 15 homers, 20 steals and getting on base a ton and scoring a lot of runs, that's a pretty nice profile going at this point in the draft, I think. And so I am, I mean, and it's also like 14 home runs on 34 barrels, that's definitely a pretty low rate right there. So I can see it. I could see being interested in him there. This is another little pocket here with Ward, Yelich, and McCarthy. And to a lesser extent, say a Suzuki. With Suzuki, it may be a situation where if he falls in the draft, like that I'm fine kind of scooping him up if maybe he goes a little bit below ADP or if some of the guys going ahead of him go. But I can definitely see interest in Yelich, and he's going to play every day. Like there's not really a concern about that, and I think that's beneficial. I think the Brewers are going to be a terrible offensively. That's one of the challenges. But
you really think they're going to be bad, huh?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a fun, interesting take right there. Okay, interesting.
The Brewers as offensively?
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. Who do they
Yeah,
have? Who's their
you got
cleanup hitter? Brian Anderson?
Rowdy Tellez. Get off of him.
I mean, Yelich, Adames,
We're
Tellez,
we're gonna do this, aren't we?
Contreras,
Yep. William.
Winker,
Williams, my guy.
Urias,
Be nice.
Mitchell, Taylor, Bryce Terang.
Yep. In the NL Central. That's a great offense. That's very top heavy. But
I wish them the best of luck.
you did promote Tyrone Taylor last week, so you might want to change your tune, friend.
I mean, that's because where he's going. Like, I mean,
I'm kidding. I'm
may the
kidding.
odds be ever in your favor for this offensive team.
I like him. I like him. I'm a Brewers fan in regards to, especially to their ADP. You can get a bunch of them at this like 100 to 300 range, which is
As we've learned
appealing.
from the Royals, Bubba, a good fantasy offense does not an offense with a number of fantasy relevant players does not
translate to real life.
Does not make a good offense in real life.
100%. And maybe that's where maybe we both agree on this. We're just talking about it differently. All right, let's talk about some deeper targets here. We'll each, like last week, pick two from ADP 200 to 300, and then we'll do two from 300 back. So I'll give you the floor. Who is your first one from 200 to 300?
Yeah, I'm going to go here. I don't love this range. I was like, I picked like a couple guys last week, and I was like, dude, I have to pick a couple more from this range here. I'm going to go with Jorge Soler. ADP, at least on my spreadsheet, of 288. He's ranked as the 255th best player. You know, that's a 1.13 on the value meter, if you will. You know, the batting average is a little bit of a concern, but the power is legit. I think it's a matter of health for Soler. And last year was really, you know, it was the first time in 3 years that he struggled with injuries. He was in a new place. I think the expectations are low now for him. He had last year, you know, 22 barrels, only 13 homers. I think mid 20s homers is a perfectly reasonable expectation. And I think if he can pull that off, I mean, as long as he's got a reasonable batting average, you know, you're going to generate some value from that. And I always think there's the possibility that he takes it, you know, kind of next level. Most of the projection systems have him between 550 and 480 plate appearances. I think he probably plays every day. I think he's the only real masher in that lineup. And, you know, he's going to be kind of etched into that DH role. And I think he can run with it as long as he's healthy. I think that he has a little bit of a point to prove after getting the contract. So I see him playing every day. And I think if he does that, he'll be golden.
Yep, could be a nice little bounce back for sure. Yes, this range is not ideal. That's why I think the guys we just talked about might be worth grabbing a few or going later. But I just had to give a shout out because he's got a full-time job now, it looks like, at least mostly full-time job. That's Trey Boo Boo. So Trey Mancini, ADP around 278 right now. Going to be the DH most likely in Chicago with chances to play maybe some first base, a little bit of outfield, but should get out there 140 so games. Projections have him for 138. He's played over 140 in 6 straight seasons, or 5 straight seasons. He's put up over 20 home runs in 4 of the 5. I don't see how he doesn't get 20 plus again, unless Wrigley's just really bad for him. Hit you 250. Like, he's just a solid stat line, no speed, but you can get 20 and 250 and maybe 70 and 70 at 278. I'm a fan of that. And that's very doable if he does play 140 plus games. So, and again, just later options. I like some Trey Boo Boo. Things, there are some declining things that are kind of not the most comforting, but overall, his quality of contact, his barrel rates, his hard hit rates, max EV was down a bit compared to what you're used to last year, but the barrel rates and the hard hit rates are similar to what we've seen over the last 5 years. And that leads me pretty comfortable to another, like I said, 20 homer plus season with 250 in him. I'll take that with Trey Boo Boo. Who is your second one?
Next one I'm going to go with, and this guy's a little bit of a shot in the dark, but I think he's one of these, last week, Jenny Butler asked about like the kind of profiles you're targeting later on in drafts. And there's a few different ones, but I think if you're going for like that, high reward, high risk player, but at a lower ADP, I think you could do a lot worse than Jose Siri. He's going around pick 300 right now. He's 262 ranked in my spreadsheet. That's a 32 ADP difference at 1.12. Obviously, some concerns about him being platooned, which you can see in his projections, which range from 450 to 500 plate appearances. But with that, 450 to 500 plate appearances, the projections have him at about 15 homers, 15 to 18 steals in that, short amount of time. And so you can kind of see the upside there. That projection has him, rated as the 200 and whatever I said, 262nd best player. If he's elite defensively. So, there's some competition there with Margot and with other folks, but I think defensively he's the best center fielder they have. And so if he can hit a little bit, then I think he can cut out some playing time for himself there. And I think that might make him a valuable guy to have. And players with his profile can go on some runs that can bring you some pretty nice value over a short little run. So I like Siri.
Yeah, he's an interesting one. I could see both ceiling and floor being quite a gap with that guy, but there is definitely some talent there. Another guy with a massive gap is Estuary Ruiz, who I'm going to put out here just because, again, range isn't the greatest, and this is a fun option. ADP around 238, and he's projected to hit ninth for the A's, but that doesn't bother me as much as the projections have him for like 102 games. At least ATC's got 123, but his overall stats are the same, so that made no sense to me at all. I think the A's have no reason not to play this guy. Like, he has to be really, really bad in my mind to not play. So I would think you're seeing more like 130, 140. Because right now, if you look at the roster, who's taking his job? Christian Pache. Like, if that's what they're going to do, then just you shouldn't have traded for Ruiz. Like, go see what the kid had. Stole almost 90 bases last year in the minors. He hit 171 in a short stint in the bigs, but throughout the minors, he was a 250-ish, 240, 250 hitter. If he can do that in the bigs, 240, 250, never a big strikeout guy. So that was big, and that translated last year. Still 19.4% K rate in his short time in the bigs. So that's promising. Walked a lot more in the minors than he did in his little sample. If he can walk more, which is obviously great for the steals game, because he was like an over 400 OBP guy a lot of the time in the minors, which would be electric with his speed. We're talking massive steals from Mr. Ruiz. This is a big ifs and whats and buts and whatever. But I just think this is one of the projections playing time wise, overall production, we'll see. But I think he plays a lot more than 102 games for the A's unless he's just horrific. And at that point, you're dropping him anyways. So an ADP at 238, I'm intrigued with the upside of the ceiling that Estuary Ruiz could bring to the table. And I'd be willing to take a chance in certain leagues based on your early draft status. That's about it.
Yeah, he's a good example of how projections can change pretty dramatically based on playing time. I remember we talked about him a few weeks back, and I was saying how much the projection systems liked him. And at the time, it was limited to just Steamer. And now that it's baked in all the other projections, it's like, we don't like him as much. So it's interesting just to see from kind of a 1 month to the next how dramatic of a shift there can be in the way a player is showing up as a value or not.
Yeah, it's fun seeing all the pieces of the puzzle get put together. ADP 300 plus, who is your first player?
Yeah, this is kind of a throwback to last year, and I didn't mean to just choose Marlins, but I'm going to go with Avi Garcia, who I liked a lot last year. He is an ADP of 328. His projection is 221st. So he's a significant value, almost 1.5, 1.48. Like if you liked Avi Garcia last year, it's hard to see what has changed all that much. Obviously having a horrific season, being injured, not really seeming like you're showing up in the shape that you need to is one thing. But, if he can stay healthy, I think there's power. There's a little bit of speed there as well. There's the batting average. And so I think there's a lot of potential there for return. So I do like him quite a bit, Avi Garcia, as a late outfield shot.
Don't hate it at all. My first one, I'm going to say Drew Waters. This one is a little more appealing to me now with the trade of Michael Taylor to Minnesota. I think with Waters, and you could even do Edward Olivares if you wanted to as well. Waters is locked in, at least for the most part, as the center fielder now for the Royals, which might not have been the case so much. And he's got an ADP of 431, as high as 369. So I think that's going to keep rising. But came over in that trade from Atlanta last year, has showcased a little bit of power, maybe like 10-ish home runs on a full season, but a lot of speed. He can get you 20 plus steals. A profile that feels a lot like Stephen Kwan-esque, kind of, without the maybe the elite batting average. Like in the minors, he hit around 300, but maybe he hits 250, 260. You're getting him 200, 300 picks later than Stephen Kwan. But I like the power, the speed you get there. Maybe the OBP skills improve, but it's another one of those projections. The bat's got him for 81 games. Shoot him out there to 130, and you're maybe, like I said, you're talking 11 home runs, 15, 16 steals, and becomes a lot more interesting in an ADP of 431. And especially in DC's a guy that should play a lot, which is what you're looking for late in DC. So Drew Waters would be a guy I could see moving up a bit. Plus, he's got a little bit of a prospect pedigree, so we might not even have seen the true talent yet in the bigs. So it could be even a little bit better. We'll see. But and you put him in that roster. You just mentioned how good for fantasy, maybe not for real life. He's projected to hit ninth. That wraps around all those big hitters. He could score a ton of runs too. So could be interesting with Drew Waters. Who's your next one?
My next one is Enrique Hernandez, Kike Hernandez. He is going at pick 380 currently, and he is 322nd in the good old spreadsheet right now, which makes him a really nice value there. I think right now he's penciled in to play shortstop. So he should get that dual position eligibility. Where he's going to hit in the lineup, is a little bit unclear. I think Yoshida looks like he's going to be at least he's got the OBP skills to be at the top of that lineup. Roster Resource has him currently penciled in as number 2, but I'm a little skeptical of that. But either way, he should play every day. He's got a little bit of pop. We know that from last year. He got unlucky from a home run perspective. Did I move off? Yeah, I went to Roster Resource page. I think he had, 17 barrels last year and 6 home runs, I think, after hitting 20 home runs the year before. Yeah, 17 barrels and just 6 home runs. So a little lack of fortune on that end. So I think, if he's batting it towards the front end of the lineup, then I think, there's even more the value there. But even if he isn't, at his 550 or so plate appearance projection, you're still looking at a guy who, I think should play every day for a Red Sox team that, while not as good as it has been in the past, does have, a little bit of talent.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with Boston on this one. Their new center fielder, which makes me laugh every time I think about it. Adam Duvall, ADP of 481, as high as 376 since the first. But the thing with Duvall, we know it's a power thing with him. The average has never been real great. But I've talked to Shelly V, previewing the Red Sox a couple days ago. You look at all the other reports that are coming out. They want Duvall in center field to play nearly every day. So it's one of those wow. When we've seen him play 130 plus games, he's hit over 30 home runs in 3 of the 4 seasons he's done that. Driven in 99 or more in 3 of the 4. I'm not saying he's going to do all that, but we're talking 25 home runs seems realistic with some runs and RBIs, and maybe hits 240, 250 if you're getting lucky. I think at the ADP that he's bringing you, it's a nice late round power source with some counting stats. Like maybe he gets you a combined 160 runs and RBIs. That would be really nice coming that late in the draft. So a guy like Adam Duvall is interesting to me. I think it's crazy to have him as their starting center fielder, but they're dead set on that. Even though they traded for Adalberto Mondesi, who now the reports are he's not even going to be ready for opening day, which is even more comical. So that really doesn't change the landscape of much. So yeah, it's Duvall's going to start the season in center field and play as much as he can. So I'll take that at ADP of 481. All right. Listener questions. Let's got a couple here to peruse through, and we kind of hinted at one earlier, Toby, and it comes from our buddy Little Book of Calm. Let me pull it up here. Regarding homebrew projections, aggregations in Excel, kind of like what you and others do, of course, is making a blend of ATC, BAT, Steamer, really just a worse version of ATC? He asked that because ATC is kind of an accumulation of different projections, which already accounts for a weighted awaits those projections internally. Is there a benefit to using a homebrew aggregate over ATC, especially one that includes ATC? Not part of the question. Love the pod. Hope the question doesn't read aggressively. I worry the character limit made it read meanly. I'm just curious. No, we get it. You're curious. It's a great question because we kind of hinted at it earlier, how it all breaks down. So, Toby, Mr. Projections, the floor is yours.
It was such a mean question. No, I'm just kidding. It's very thoughtful of him to throw that second email, just making sure it's clear. So I think my thinking has evolved a little bit on this, and I'm going to try to answer this one without, rubbing any people the wrong way as I kind of respond to this. So I think in the past, a few years ago, even I would have just used ATC and I would have just kind of thrown it in there. And because it is an aggregate of projections, I would have used that. And I think ATC has been very successful, over the long period of time at being a great, at being a projection system that is an effective projection system. And so I think if that's something that you want to do, I think that is totally cool. But I think my line of thinking on it has changed a little bit recently. I think, there's a lot of different analyses on the various projection systems, strengths, weaknesses. And I think what kind of comes out in the wash of it is there are certain projection systems that, tend to be a little bit better. And then but they're all seem to fluctuate season to season. And I think there are also changes in the environment that aren't even accounting for the projection system in and of itself. And so one of the things about it is ATC is an aggregate. And so it takes these kind of, it's I don't know how to explain it, but a second level projection in the sense that there are people who create their individual projections and it tries to take the best of those. And I think in the way that it's framed, it's I was thinking about how to answer this question. And I think about it a little bit as how we think about economics. I feel like growing up, you think of economics as a hard math where you're if this thing happens, then this thing happens, but that's not the way that economics works. It's just as much theory as anything else. Right. And so when you use the ATC projection, you're essentially, and again, it's one thing to say oh, well, I take the projections and I choose the ones that are the best at certain things and I use those. And that assumes that the projections are static in terms of how they're doing from year to year, or that one year will be similar to the subsequent year. And that there isn't a perspective that is placed upon those projections to determine which ones are the best ones. It's not, I don't think it's something where you can say very clearly and easily, this is the best one, or this is the best thing to take out, or it's not. There's a selection criteria or process that happens within that. And I think a really interesting, and one of the reasons why I think my mind is evolving a little bit on this, is one of the really interesting discussions on that Pull Hitter podcast that had Jeff, and Tanner and Phil and Steve. And thankfully I was included in that, even though I just showed up at the end and I really didn't say anything of any merit, was just this idea of when you're aggregating projections, one of the things that you want to do is you want to have as many inputs and as many perspectives as possible. You want the projections in and of themselves to be good projections, but you also don't, if all of them are the same, then you don't really benefit much from aggregation. And so what I'm trying to think about is, how do I get a variety of different projections that all come from a different place, right? So if we look throughout the years, and Jeff Zimmerman does this analysis, at the rate stats, for instance. So if we take out plate appearances and we just say, which projections are best at determining rate stats? Which ones are best at determining average? Which are the best at determining counting stats? It fluctuates, right? And in many situations, the BatX, is, at least I think in the 2021 one, was the best projection system at that. It was actually the plate appearances that was the difference. Yep. Right. And then if you look at the game theory approach that Jeff Zimmerman does, oftentimes ATC and BatX are kind of at the top there, but they're good at different things. Yep. And so the way that I'm thinking about it now, more so than in the past, is I want to kind of look at those first level projection systems. I think the BatX is really good in the bat. I think that those are it's time in and time out. It's really good. The Bat X for hitting, the Bat for pitching. I think they're very good. So I weigh that, probably heavier than the other ones. I think Steamer is also a very good projection system. And so I have Steamer, and I have part of that, but then also the Razball, Rudy's projections take Steamer as a base and then apply different plate appearances. And one thing I think is really good to get a lot of different perspectives on, and I think is really good to get ATC's perspective on because it's been really good at it, is the plate appearance aspect of it. And I think you want to have as many high quality inputs as you can on that. And so I definitely include that, within ATC. But I want to look at, so you got the Bat, and then you have Steamer, and you have these different inputs in terms of what Raz is doing. And Rudy was even talking about he's making some updates to it now to like the BABIP formula for pitchers, and he's putting his tweaks on it, but generally it's a system that I trust. So those are kind of two of them. And then there's also there's Baseball HQ, which has a very different methodology to put together hits.
Way different. Yeah.
And then there's also Zips, which has a very different methodology. And Jeff was talking about this, that actually, that system is based on it essentially has comparison. So it looks at similar player seasons, similar ages, and it makes projections based on that. Now, it's not as effective as the other ones, but it's taking this data that isn't necessarily built into the other ones, and it's incorporating it into this kind of meta projection. And so, that's one that I'm really excited to be entering into it. And then I think ATC as well is a part of that for mine as well. But it's really hard because you don't know, again, and I have the most respect for Ariel, and I think he does a great job, and ATC is a great projection system, but it's kind of his perspective, right? And we don't really know how much of each projection system it's taking. And so it's really hard to know how much you're double counting and how much you aren't. And so that's why I'm struggling with having it be a huge weight within my projections.
Makes a lot of sense
this year. And so I'm really trying to take that kind of let's take, I'm going to have Zips in there, Baseball HQ, Steamer, the Bat X, and then I'm going to have ATC in there, and I've got to figure out, because Tanner's spreadsheet only has 5. So I've got to figure out which one I drop or don't weigh in there. But I want to take those systems that take a different approach, because I think generally they're going to get you to the right place, and having as many inputs as possible in that type of a projection system is something that will benefit it. And it would be really interesting to take that meta projection and compare it to how the other projection systems do it. But I think we all have kind of our own way of fine tuning that and modifying the, SGPs just to maybe account for maybe our playing styles or different elements of the season or how we think it's going to go. So I don't know if that's a super good explanation, but I think the way that I think of it is I want to have a wisdom of the crowds. And while ATC in and of itself is that, because it melds those different projection systems, it is still the perspective of one person who is doing the melding, if you will. And so that's why I'm kind of trying to take in a lot more data inputs and perspectives in the different projection systems that I'm using, because honestly, the one that I trust the most is probably the Bat X and the Bat, and then ATC for the playing time projections. And so, and so it's kind of I feel pretty good weighing those ones heavily. But the Bat is already using, I think, ATCs, or it will end up using ATC's playing time projections like it did last year. And so I think some of that's already baked into it. So hopefully that's a decent explanation. And again, I don't mean to be critical at all of
you weren't critical. I'm going to tell you that right now. Okay. You said it. You said it really nicely, because the way you build this out, which makes sense, is you want weights towards different things. And so Ariel's system is really great, but you don't know how it's weighted already, so you could be misweighting it when you do it. That's what you said, basically, in a roundabout way. There's nothing critical about that. That's just honest. And he'd have to admit that too, is because he says it. He says he does his own little tweaking and his own weightings and stuff. And you don't want to, if you were to weight it heavily and this thing's already weighted heavily, now you're overweighting something, and that could screw up your whole thing. So no, to me, at least that's how I understood you saying it. That did not come off critical at all. That was just honest. And I would imagine Ariel, who's a very, very understanding person, would completely get that, because he's making projections, and that's the same thing. He doesn't want to overweight something as well. So that just makes sense to me. But my question for you, this is nothing crazy, because this
wasn't on the agenda.
No, everything you said made total sense. I just wanted to add on to that real quick. And And this is, again, you just said Tanner's sheet only allows 5 projections, so it's kind of difficult. Have you ever thought about using was it Master Ball with Zola? Because I know a lot of guys use that one as well.
Oh yeah. I'm I don't have access to it. I'm not a subscriber. You need to be a subscriber.
Yeah.
And I have been a subscriber. I was a subscriber one year. Todd was very kind um and
That's when
offered.
he won TGFBI. He gave everybody in TGFBI a
Yeah,
free
he gave it.
subscription.
Yeah, totally. And again, like, I mean, and I know really smart people use his projection as part of their aggregate as well. So again, not a criticism of that. I think that's a great system, and a lot of really successful players use it. If I had access to it, I certainly would probably include that as an input.
I was wondering.
But yeah, getting the weighting is so difficult, because I do think there are certain systems that you trust a lot, and I think that's why ATC is helpful in some respects, in the sense that, like, people have a lot of faith in Ariel to pick that right, combination of the projection system.
I think what would be great, because for what you're using with the weighting systems, it makes total sense where you don't maybe want to weight ATC a ton. Now, if you're just looking at someone's Fangraphs page, like I do a lot, or someone else does, you maybe use ATC more so because it is factoring everything in and it makes more sense. I'm with you. Like, I love ATCs at bats. I look at it, to me, the Bat X is the game of choice for me when all things are considered. But ATC is very, very good. And you mentioned it, they work together, because parts of ATC has the Bat and the Bat X in it. Eventually, Cardi is going to use ATC's plate appearances. Like, it's kind of a yin and a yang situation, which is fun. So I'm with you on that one. I guess the last thing is, because I don't want to make the whole podcast about, I guess, projection systems, but it kind of leads on to maybe what other questions could come from this. Like, the last thing you do, or one of the last things you do after you meld them all together, you weight them all, you might adjust a few things. And that's where everyone's like secret sauce comes different. It's like everyone kind of sees it differently. Like I said earlier in the GTE chat, I've been listening to Kerwin and those guys talk about how they're trying to, like, give someone more at bats, or this or that or the other. It's a fun conversation, and there's probably no rhyme or right reason to it. How do you go about that? I guess is because you've done it for a few years now, so you kind of have a rough idea how you want to go about it. But how do you go about it for someone that might be starting out their first year of trying to do this?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, I generally don't do plate appearance adjustments. The one plate appearance adjustment I did last year was for Dalton Varsho.
Yeah, so that was too obvious.
Yeah, so I think he was at like 400 plate appearances, and I gave him 500. I want to say something like that, or 550. This year, I've only done it for one player, and that's Lars Nootbaar, where he's coming in at about 450 plate appearances, and I think I feel comfortable giving him 550 because I think he's a really good player. I think the Cardinals like him a lot, and I think he probably hits towards the top of the lineup against righties at least. So
yeah.
I feel pretty good about that, and I think that the valuation that I have in my system with him at 450 is just totally off. Like, I don't agree with it. So that's like one, but I will make very few plate appearance adjustments, just because I think wisdom of the crowds and getting as many inputs on that as possible is kind of a better tactic, if you will. So I think one way that you can do it is, like, you have your SGP. So essentially, like, how many runs or RBI or batting average points is a standard standings game point. And you can play with those numbers to account for different things. For instance, like last year, which was probably a reason why I struggled offensively, was I looked at it and I said, you want to know something? The thing that I'm most worried about is being short in steals and batting average. So what I want to do is bump up a little bit the value of batting average and steals, and knock down a little bit the value of home runs.
Gotcha.
So when I did that, like, theoretically, I was like, oh, well, this is great. Well, I did that, and then home runs dried up. And so I was even underweighting home runs in and of themselves, right? And so that became a really big challenge. So I see that being a little bit more difficult, this year. But if you were to say, for instance, I don't think the projection systems are baking in enough steals. Like I think there's going to be a X% stealing across the board. These players are going to be better. Then you may say, you want to know something? I think I can devalue steals a little bit within the SGP. So make more steals. So like right now, I think this year it's like 4.4 steals as a standing game point. So maybe you say, okay, I'm going to change that to 5 steals. So I'm going to make it so, or I'm going to make it 4. I'm going to make it like, I'm confusing my own self. Like I'm going to make them be worth less. So essentially
they're not weighted as heavy.
Yeah, they're going to bump them up. So like it requires more to get a standings game point. Yeah. And so, so you can do things like that. Or I think the ball is going to bounce back a little bit. Well, then home runs are overvalued as it is. So you want to devalue them, a little bit. And so I think those are the types of changes that you can make to the SGP to account for that. Now, one other thing that you could do too is, when you are calculating like the rate stats, like batting average and things like that, you could also bake in a change there. So like you always get the league average, batting average, right? That's kind of where you build off of, in terms of above or below standing game points. And so it's like, okay, well, if I think that batting average is going to be higher this year and the projections are not accurately accounting for that increase, well, then I could either adjust the SGP to make it so that they devalued batting average a little bit, or I could change what the kind of median line for, what replacement value is essentially for batting average level is in your sheet. And so you can kind of make those types of tweaks that will not dramatically, depending on how much you change them, but can change the valuation systems, a little bit. And then there are other things that you can do within it in Tanner's spreadsheet where you can change the hitter pitcher split. And that can have a dramatic difference. So if you're like, traditionally it's been around 67 to 33 is typically what it's been at. NFBC main events are closer to like 62 or 61. Sometimes I put it all the way down to 60. But what can happen there is if your values are widely different from the market, then you can find yourself in a situation where, yeah, you're taking a bunch of values, but you're so off of the market that, that you're taking them like they will be. I'm trying to think of a good way to say this. You'll be missing out essentially because you're yeah, exactly. You're not factoring in the market in terms of where you're taking guys. And, there's different perspectives on that. Like, I know that that's honestly like oftentimes an argument against taking catchers early on. Like the fact that it's not aligned with kind of the market and how it values catchers, which is a totally reasonable thing to say. So I think there's different approaches and you got to account for it. Generally, I try not to mess with it too much because I think that's when you can get into like challenges. You can also factor in things like, generally, I feel like I always have too many steals and I don't have enough homers. Well, then maybe you want to devalue steals and, bump up the value of homers a little bit in how you take a look at it. So that's kind of like, I think what you're thinking about as you develop the spreadsheet and kind of make it your own. And that's why like people could plug in the same valuation, the same projection systems at the same weights. And the spreadsheet also allows you to choose the weight, essentially. So it's like, 0.4 bat X, 0.4 this, 0.2 this, 0.0015 this, if you really wanted to. So that's why, like, even with this, using the same projections, you will sometimes get different valuations for players is because the different hitter pitcher split or different SGP formulas. So it's really hard to get the exact same spreadsheet unless you run it the exact way that Tanner has set it up, which, you can definitely do that. And I think it's a super valuable tool doing that. But I think learning how to adapt it is also a good thing to learn.
I love it. That was a nice little crash course there. And I recommend checking out. The process goes deep into these things, the projections, how to tweak them to your likings and whatnot. And obviously Tanner's a part of that, and Tanner has his spreadsheets you can get and pretty self-explanatory once he sends you all that stuff too. So yeah, it's very interesting stuff, and it's a nice way to kind of customize it to the way you like it, but also not going crazy because you still have to kind of fall within the boundaries of the projection, if that makes sense. Like you can't just go, you can go wacky, but if you do that, you're not going to be successful. That's just, you're crazy, but you can still kind of make it to what you need, what you like, your style, but still kind of be fine tuned with the projection and keeps you within a range of, outcomes that make sense, I guess, if that makes any sense at all. So I like it quite a bit. All right, we got one other question for you here from our buddy Dave Petroziello of, and it's a Corbin Carroll question. He says, "I'm iffy on Corbin Carroll at his price, but did you guys see the tweet? And I'm not sure if it's from someone we know. It was like 2 or 3 weeks ago, but the tweet said, with the new rules, he should steal 40 bases. Well, if he does that, his current price, if he steals, is pretty obvious. I think we're both kind of curious about that price. We weren't really in on him at his current price. I don't know if he steals 40 bags, to be honest."
Yeah, I think that is I think that's way too high. You know, and one of the things that I think is important is oftentimes like a criticism of projections is that they're too conservative. And projections they're median projections. So like it's the median expectation. If there were 100 seasons, and you put them all together, this is the most likely season to happen. They're median projections. And I think the challenge is when you start doing things like Corbin Carroll is going to steal 40 bases. Yep. Generally, when you do that, you don't just do that for Corbin Carroll. Like you have a mentality that, these projections are conservative. And as a result, they're under guessing all the guys that I like and that I think are going to be really good. And the nice thing about a projection system is you have 14 players in your lineup. And so the projection system and the way they work, it's like regression to the mean. It's like of those 14 projections, some of them will be wildly off. Some of them will be pretty on target. Some of them will be over. Some of them will be under. But the most likely outcome is towards all of those stats that you're counting that are within the projection. And that's why I love doing that within a draft is that actually gives me a pretty good sense of my team as a whole, where its strengths are, where its weaknesses are, what I can expect from it. And that accounts for some players being better, some players being worse. And I think it's a really good way. Like our biases are strong, like every bias you could imagine operates in fantasy baseball. And so one way to kind of take that out a little bit of the equation, not entirely, right? Because we want to have fun, is projection systems. It's a good check. It doesn't mean you can't be excited about a player or think they're going to be doing really well. And maybe you have that one player, like maybe for me, it's Lars Nootbaar, where I'm like, I'm giving him 550 plate appearances and that makes him the 110th best player. And I'm going to go for that. And I think that's fine. And I think that's great. The problem is when you apply that to all of the different players, because then you're essentially just choosing who you think is
your
going to be
biases come into play way too much.
Yeah, exactly. And which again, like is totally fine. Like that's a totally fine way to play the game. But for me, in the way that I'm thinking about it, you're trying to eliminate those things from it. And some people call that fun, Bubba.
Yeah, I agree.
I just call it biases.
Yep, it's weird. And that's what really makes this whole thing fun as it's developed. Like when I first started doing even these podcasts, like projections were there, but they weren't as deep as they are now. There wasn't a lot of guys with spreadsheets. There wasn't a lot of that stuff, and that wasn't even that long ago. So how far it's already come in that amount of time, and it's very valid. Like I joke about, I couldn't even tell you what Baseball Savant was when I started, and now, you got those, you got projection sites, you got everything, and that it's still very fun. And it's just, they're great tools to use, and they can be intimidating because trust me, I'm a guy that struggles with Excel. Like I'm horrible at Excel, but if you have the time, it's worth it. If you don't have the time, well, use the projections, and there's places you can get projections like that from if you pay a couple bucks. Like Rudy's got a great setup. HQ's great. Like there's ways to do it if you don't want to do it yourself. But the point is you can do it yourself, and it's a pretty cool setup that'll, I think, take you to the next level if you can do it the right way, because it brings certain things to life that doesn't make sense. Like I keep referencing the GTE guys, but it's the first year they're doing it, so it's funny watching them kind of talk through it all. And when they run when they upload like a new projection into their thing with their ratings and weights, it there's always a couple guys like, oh man, this guy stands out, or this guy, or like they just like Simeone, like again, I don't think he cares if I say these things, but literally just did his first draft since using this setup now with all the he waited like you wait till all the projections were in, and he did his first draft, and he drafted almost strictly off the spreadsheet, like straight up. He's like, this is awesome. Like I'm doing things and like I didn't do before, because it's just like it kind of brings the whole puzzle together a little better. And obviously, there's not going to always work perfectly. That's obvious, but it still highlights a lot of things too. And so that was very interesting hearing them talk about it from a first timer thing. So again, my point, you can be new to this. It took them a lot of times, long time to figure it out. Like the three of them together, a lot of text messaging back and forth. But once they got it figured out, they've really, really enjoyed it. So it's a cool little setup.
For sure. And I think one thing that's really nice about getting the dollar value too is that if I were to say, all right, Bubba, you could have a player who's hitting 265 with 20 homers and 5 steals, or you could have a guy who's hitting 280 with 18 homers and 3 steals. Who do you want more?
Yeah,
and you could be like, I mean, there's ways to think about it outside of giving it a numerical value, but having a numerical value can tell you, you know, as long as you agree with the process that you went through it, like which player is more valuable. So you're not like, well, I think it's that one, or I think it's that one. And there's other ways to do it, right? You could just say, well, I value batting average more, and I think I can make up those home runs, so I'm going to go with that guy. But it's really nice for player comparisons, because it's like, yeah, you need something to tell you outside of like your intuition, what is a more valuable player in a lot of instances, right? Because it's like, that's an easier example. Another one could be a guy who's hitting 290 with 10 home runs and 10 steals, or a guy who's hitting 210 with 30 home runs, you know, and 0 steals, you know, like who's more valuable? I have no freaking clue. So, but my spreadsheet tells me.
Yep. No, it's a great point, because like, yeah, we could all have arguments on why. We could both be right in a roundabout way. But in the end, you look at the dollar sign, and that just tells you right there, if you trust your system that you built, it's pretty cool setup to watch it all kind of come together and do all that. So fun conversation. Great question. I enjoy this stuff because I understand it a lot more than I ever did. I still can't put it to a computer because it's time consuming for me to figure out, but I'm getting there. It's close, like, but it's fun to watch people do it because I understand it now, and it makes a ton of sense. And I think it's one of those things. It's I'm like they use the term adapt or die type thing. That's not the way this is going to work, but it definitely helps a ton. It helps a lot, especially like when you're in a draft room and there's an actual clock and you're on a timer. To be able to have that spreadsheet sitting right there helps you make those quick decisions a lot easier. So I like it. I'm curious to see how Toby his like first drafts start going using his, you know, he's worked on the projections. He's made a point to stay diligent and wait until it's all done. So now he'll get going. I'm curious to see how it goes with the first runs of this.
We'll see when that gets started. I'm trying to think. I want to do fast drafts, but maybe I'll do one slow DC in December.
Test it all out.
Yeah, just to get back in the swing of things, and then do a couple express DCs or something like that before hopping into the real thing. So we'll see.
All right, well, we'll wrap it up there. We'll go back to how we started the show. Any thoughts on the outfield position?
No, I mean, I think there are pockets of value, and I think, again, like we talked about this a little bit the first time, but you know, I think oftentimes we're so fixated on filling, you know, our outfield 1 slot by X player or things like that, when like the real thing that's important is, you know, depending on the league, building a balanced team and getting the most value out of those players, right? Regardless of what their position is. And so if it means having a weak outfield and your infield is super strong, then, you know, that's great. If it's means having a strong second baseman and a weak outfielder, you know, then that's another thing. So I think it's all relative value to one another, and not, pigeonholing ourselves, because I do think there are nice little pockets there that we did, some of which we discussed and some that we didn't, where there are guys who are available who look like they're undervalued right now by the market. And I think that's the key, is to identify those and to try to take advantage of them.
Yep, most definitely. If you guys have any further questions on the outfield, let us know. We can help you. But there is 100% another pocket coming up that's like a 12-ish home run, 10 to 12 stolen base pocket of guys coming up. So there's another one of those. Like, so it's not as much power as we already saw, but there's still another little realm of guys you can pick through towards the end of the 100s and the early 200s as well. So if you have any questions, let us know. Check out Toby on Twitter at BatFlipCrazy. I'm at BDentric. We'll be back with you guys next week as we head to the mound. We head to starting pitchers, Toby, as we've finished offense. So now it gets fun. This is Toby's wheelhouse. Pocket Aces season. We'll see. But we'll catch you guys next week. This was
Read them and weep, baby. Read them and weep.
Read them and weep. Pocket Aces with the catcher. Catch you guys later.